स्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। नमः श्री यतिराजाय विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित् सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे अखंड मंडलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ओम सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम। We are in the middle of the Navaratri, Durga Puja in Bengal, and Navaratri and Ramanavami, Rama's victory over evil, etc. I will chant the Devi Stuti. Sarvamangalamangallye Shive Sarvartha Sadhike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute Srishti Sthiti Vinashanam Shakti Bhute Sanatani Gunashraye Gunamaye Narayani Namostute Sharanagata Dinartha Paritrana Parayani सर्वस्यार्ति हरे देवी नारायणि नमोस्तुते नारायणि नमोस्तुते। ओम असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतंगमय। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम। Okay. Very good evening. Namaste to everybody and welcome Shri Professor Jagdish Gopalan from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Professor Gopalan had his early schooling in the prestigious Sri Ramakrishna Vidyashala in Mysore. It's our Ramakrishna Mission, one of the branches in Mysore, and a very popular, very interesting, inspiring institution, residential composite college, junior college up to 12th standard or pre-university, as it is called in Karnataka. So he studied there, then moved to the National College, then distinction from Bangalore Institute of Technology, Master of Engineering in Thermal Science in Birla Institute of Technology, that is BITS in Ranchi. And from the Indian Institute of Science, he got his PhD in Aerospace Engineering in '98. He was a visiting professor in Japan for about 3 years before joining as a full-fledged research scientist in 2001. He is currently a senior professor in the Department of Aerospace Engineering, Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. There are many more contributions of Professor Jagdish Gopalan, but one thing we are proud of, we are happy, is that he is a product of the Ramakrishna Mission School in Mysuru. So he has been groomed by the various faculty and monks of the Ramakrishna order, and till today has kept a very good connection with us. And just by phone call, in spite of the busy schedule, traveling all over the country, and India is moving forward in science, in technology, in research, as all of you have seen that or knowing it in the news. So many things, wonderful things happening for the good welfare of the country. So one important point is science and spirituality have to shake hands. That was Vivekananda's dream. There's a beautiful dialogue in our Upanishads between two sages. Said, we have a question from an earnest student to a great teacher. That is in the Mundaka Upanishad. Kasminnu bhagavo vignate sarvamidam vignatam bhavati iti. I'll read out again. Please be attentive. Kasminnu bhagavo vignate sarvamidam vignatam bhavati. What is that reality? What is that reality, O Blessed One, by knowing which we can know all that there is in this manifested universe? In other words, by knowing one, I should be able to know many. One is equal to many. The one in the many and the many in the one. One is yoga and another is the yajna. So this was the question put thousands of years ago. Kasminnu bhagavo vignate sarvamidam vignatam bhavati iti. And the teacher, very learned, very scholarly, very deep, he's answered, Dve vidye veditavye. There are two vidyas, two branches of knowledge. Iti hasma yad brahmavido vadanti parachaiva aparacha. Meaning is, there are two vidyas or sciences. Vidya means science. It can be music, it can be cooking, it can be meditation, it can be research, it can be anything which gives you knowledge. Gardening, so many sciences. Mathematics is a science. So where you get that truth is Vidya. To be acquired by man. One is called Paravidya, higher science or supreme science, and the other is Aparavidya, ordinary science or knowledge. Ata para yaya tadaksharam adigamyate. That is Paravidya or higher science by which the imperishable is realized. The Akshara is realized. Here two words again, Akshara, Kshara. Kshara is the material world and Akshara is the spiritual world, the higher world. So one was external search for truth, another is the internal search for truth. So a scientist by his meditation, by his sadhana can attain the highest truth because he's already involved with material, involved with concentration, with dedication, with finding the truth in space, in water, in the earth, in plants, in minerals. So many things are happening, whether it's astronomy, whether it is marine engineering, whether it is geography, whether it is missiles. And similarly in meditation, in spirituality, this research is there. I'm not going into the detail, this is not the time. We have a crisp, precise point of how all of you young people, the youth of India from all parts of the country will absorb the spirit of science and combine it with values and spirituality and make our life happy, make our life peaceful, and our country a developed country, and make the Vivekananda's vision and the vision of the sages a reality. So Professor Jagdish Gopalan, connected with Adhyatmikata and connected with science, is here with us. So we welcome him, thank him for his time for next 30 minutes. I request him to share his ideas on how the youth can take the scientific spirit forward. Over to Professor Jagdish Gopalan. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Swamiji, and lovely good evening to all of you. I think the short video that you played, as well as your initial remarks, very nicely sets the tone for a discussion that people normally have. The youngsters who are involved in science, they think scientists as people, normally they are atheists. They don't believe in the spirituality because they will never really value anything without evidence. So I have actually had these questions being posed to me at different forums when I interact with younger crowd. What is the connection between spirituality and science? Going to temple, is it spirituality? Worshipping, is it spirituality? If that is so, then what is the connection between science? So what I will do today in the next maybe 20-25 minutes is to clearly articulate the differences or the commonalities between these two terms, namely science and spirituality. So the caption, if you would like to sum it up, value-based science is the stepping stone for success. Value-based science is the stepping stone for success. Obviously, this gives us a very important question. What is science? Man lives in a world which is surrounded by all kinds of beautiful things. And it is very important for us to realize that if we can understand our nature and culture, our future will be secure. So it's very important for us to understand our nature and our culture so that your future can be secure. When you say nature, what is the nature? Is it something which is there outside? Yes, we usually coin the word nature to everything that we are able to see with our eyes, smell with our nose, hear with our ears, and perceive. It could be beautiful forest. It could be other fellow beings who are there with us. It could be oceans, or it could be huge mountains, or animals which live in this wonderful biodiversity, or the sky up above us where we see indomitable length of the space. So many new planets are there, stars are there. So it's unbelievably complicated nature that we live with. Maybe even after another 1,000 years, I don't think we will be able to completely understand this external world called nature, which is made out of five basic elements, which are called as Panchabhutas. And in terms of science, even our human body, at the end of our life, when we are either burnt or buried, is also an organic matter which is going to reduce into ashes. So it is this wonderful journey of maybe 40 years, 50 years, or 80, 90 years, where we live around this world, that we always try to perceive what is there with the outer world. Can we live in this carefully? Can we actually save all the different resources? So it is this particular journey of trying to understand the external nature is what is popularly called as science. I think as youngsters, all of you would like definitions. So if you want a definition, systematic evidence-based approach in trying to understand the external nature that we live is science. But this definition also appears to be a little complicated. So you want maybe a simple definition. Science is all about asking the question why. Science is all about asking the question why and trying to find answer to that question in a very, very systematic manner, logical manner, analytical manner. Of course, along with science nowadays, you also hear the word engineering and technology. Then what is engineering? Engineering is asking the question why not and then trying to find answers to that. But in technology, you never ask any question. For you, it has to work every time. I'll give you a very simple example. I am sure most of you would have seen a lotus flower. Have you seen a lotus flower? I presume some of you might have seen. But have you seen a lotus leaf? Some of you are all probably from remote areas where in a village you would have seen a pond. The lotus leaf usually droops down by about 30 degrees. And the lotus leaf is never dirty. Although the pond could be dirty, the lotus leaf is never dirty. If you are having any doubt, please go back and take a look. And it also actually droops down to it's not flat, but it actually droops down at about 30 degrees. So one German scientist was very keen just to cut a piece of lotus leaf and put it under the microscope. And on a lotus leaf, always when you put a drop of water, it actually, the surface tension ensures that it becomes like a globule, and then it also takes away the dirt particles along with it, and it never stays there because of the slope. And the question that he asked scientifically was, why is it that no dirt stays on lotus leaf? He was just curious. So curiosity is the mother of science in some sense. You want to understand. And then he found out that there are nano-sized ridges on the lotus leaf, which actually make sure that the water, because of surface tension, forms a very nice droplet. And because of the slope, it actually absorbs the dust and it just goes down. So this is science, asking the question why a lotus leaf is not dirty and trying to understand reason by cutting open a small lotus leaf, putting it under the microscope, observing the nano-sized ridges, calculating the surface tension forces, and then trying to clearly come out with the answer as to why dirt particles do not settle down on a lotus leaf. That is science. Now, one other individual who was little crazy like an engineer, he said, can I create a surface or can I create particles which are almost like a lotus leaf? If I do that, the dust will never settle down on those particles. He was a very bold engineer and he asked the question, why not? And he went and created all kinds of paints, all kinds of surfaces. Today in automobile, you have surfaces where dust does not settle down. And today it has become a technology. And when it becomes a technology, you only hear advertisements saying dust does not settle down. There are paints today which are available that they use in household, where when you paint it using that, the particles are inspired exactly by the structure of the lotus leaf. So I can give you a number of examples like this. So what is the first part of our discussion? What is science? Science is all about understanding nature in a logical, systematic manner, trying to look at evidence rather than speculation, trying to look at concrete evidence by a systematic manner and not an evidence which you perceive. Because science, honesty and sincerity are the cornerstones on which any scientific the investigation goes on. Okay, this is in one side of the story. That means you understand the external nature. But to do all of this, why did that one particular crazy individual went and looked at what happens, why the lotus leaf is not dirty? He started thinking completely different to a normal individual. If you want to understand that, you also should figure out what is your inner nature. The inner nature is what is popularly called as spirituality. And when you want to understand your inner nature and your purpose in life, even that is a highly scientific investigation. Swamiji very nicely played a movie in the beginning where he called as consciousness. Friends, you may not believe, today, cognitive science is one of the most advanced form of scientific faculty, where multiple disciplines like neurosurgeons, engineers, psychologists, social scientists, all of them are working, and multi-billion-dollar program happens across the world, and everybody is now trying to measure consciousness. Whether they succeed in this journey or not is a different issue. But what is very important is people have actually recognized that if you can understand your inner nature, then you will become a much better individual. So that is why in the beginning I said, understanding inner nature is spirituality, understanding your interaction with the external nature is science. So science and spirituality in some sense are two faces of the same coin. They are not really different. Now, what is this inner nature? Right from the day when we are born, obviously there is a body. In fact, we haven't really understood completely about our body as per scientific records even today. There are millions of cells which actually die every second in our body. We are unable to recreate one eye. In fact, many a times when I go to rural area, people come and ask me, sir, we are all very poor. We don't have food to eat. You give big lectures, science and all, but next day we are not able to get a job. How do we manage? Then I ask a simple question. Are you all, whoever is there in this audience, are you all able to see? Definitely you're able to see and you're able to listen. NASA, along with Lockheed Martin, several decades ago, started a program called Bionic Eye. They wanted to create an artificial eye. The eye, which looks so small, is such a complicated system, and they spent about $25 billion. How much is 1 billion? Do you have any idea? It is actually 7,500 crores of rupees. So your one eye, they spent $25 billion, but they could not succeed in recreating an eye. And that research is still on. There is nothing called artificial eye that exists today. All of you have two pairs of eyes, two eyes, which means you are on billionaires. Something like $50 billion. So 50 into 7,500 crores is what God has given you. Even if I give you, say, 100 crores, will you be ready to give one hand? In fact, the most modern robotics is not able to recreate what a hand can actually do. In fact, it is so amazing. If you are keeping track with the Nobel Prizes this year, the Nobel Prize has been given for the fundamental scientific investigation on how do you really feel pain, how do you feel actually the hotness and how do you feel the coldness? This hand is such an amazing creation that you're able to feel what is hot, you're able to feel what is cold, you're able to smell, you're able to hold. Mechanically, this has got infinite degree of freedom. You can rotate it in any direction you feel like, you can press, you can do all kinds of things. I'm talking about a normal hand, of course, not the one where it's broken or anything like that. So every part of our physical structure, starting from your knee, your lungs, people are not able to recreate a lung today. Lung is so wonderful that it has got such thin membrane, and everything is probably to the size of a tennis ball. But then when you want to spread it out on the ground, it can actually occupy the space as big as a tennis court. It's simply unbelievable. It's mind-boggling how such creations are possible. They forget about our regular tongue and other things. In fact, even tongue is so interesting. Many years ago, we were doing some research with the tea. And I work in an area where what is called as a shock wave, where you expose these tea leaves to shock waves, the tea actually started tasting better. And then when the tea taster came, I am sure most of you may have grandparents or grandmothers at home. When you drink tea, usually you make a sound, right? And you usually tell them, hey, don't make noise. That is not the way to drink coffee or tea. In fact, if you come towards Karnataka, they don't drink the coffee by cup, but they put it in a saucer and hold it like this. They do a sound. And for a long time, even I was ignorant. I thought that that is not a good way to drink tea or coffee, and that is mostly to do with people who are in villages. But a tea taster educated me and told me that right below your tongue, there are these corner taste buds. And when you make that sound, air bubbles get trapped at the lower parts of your tongue. And those air bubbles will have the polyphenol fragrance which is coming out from the tea when hot water or milk is poured. And when the bubble bursts, you get the sound and you're able to taste tea or coffee. And he said, that is the only way that you should drink coffee or tea. Look at the beauty of that one flexible muscle that God has created or whatever has happened. We have to ask these questions. I'm only looking at physical organs. But then if you come to the mind, it is an unbelievable treasure of all kinds of things. In fact, there has been no scientist in the modern era other than Swami Vivekananda who has actually spent so much time in explaining to individuals what is there in a mind. In fact, very scientifically, he talks about why mind is all the more important than your physical actions and things like that. When you are born, we are not even aware. We are not able to speak. We only look at things, external things. We look at mother, and only mother tells you who is the father. And after some time, they give you some name. And when the name is called, you start responding to it. And when something is given to you, you start smiling. But then as a child, all of us have this habit of kind of a wonderment. Everything is new for us because we want to learn. And you learn because you just want to learn. You don't learn because what will I get at the end of the day? The simplest example could be now that Diwali is coming, mothers or somebody would light a small lamp. And as a small child, she would say, don't go and touch the lamp. What will you do? You will go and touch it. She will say, don't pull that particular thing which is kept. It's a glass. So when it falls down, maybe it will break, it will hurt you. But when the mother is looking on the other side, you slowly want to touch and feel. And when it breaks, it might hurt you and mother may come and scold you. You may cry. But then after that, you start smiling. Now, the important quality that we should remember throughout our life journey is never ever stop asking the question why, and please don't stop smiling. These are the most useful properties or qualities one has to imbibe because every day is a wonderment. Now, again, coming back to this particular topic, how people are able to react. You react because certain words are spoken to you. In the beginning, they all will look like certain words. And the word essentially is a sound which comes out from your, esophagus when it comes out. So I won't get into the way how sound is produced. Now, the phonetics, as it is called, is a huge branch of engineering where people try to look at how different sounds are generated. Now, when I say sound, this holds good even for human beings. This also holds good for animals. Animals have got all kinds of sound. In fact, two elephants can actually talk. And sound has got a frequency which actually ranges across the spectrum. I do not know if you are still aware of a word called infrasonic. And this is a word which actually has a frequency between 18 hertz to 25 hertz. And it's a very low frequency system. And whenever you enter a certain temple, when you enter the sanctum sanctorum, you feel as if there are goosebumps over your body. Or when you hear a very good music, somebody singing very well, suddenly your body becomes, as if the hairs actually rise. Or someone performing, you feel like that. Or you enter into certain buildings, you feel like that. Of course, out of fear also, you may feel when you enter a police station or whether you enter a court or whether you enter a hospital. Why does that happen? Because the human body is also made out of low frequencies. It's all between that regime, 18 hertz to 25 hertz. When there is a frequency match, I am sure you would have studied in high school physics what is called as resonance. Because of this resonance, you suddenly wake up. There are tribal groups in Africa where they actually blow a small piece of, musical instrument, and it produces this infrasonic which you cannot hear actually. But that frequency matches with the bird, and the bird actually falls down. Even in Bible, there is a pipe where a person, when he blows, at the end of the day, it can actually create a frequency which can go and match with your natural frequency, and it can be quite catastrophic. Now, the reason why I am saying this is the sound basically becomes some kind of a word. The sound, the letters and sound. That is why Chinese, they have a different way of thinking. Japanese have a different way of thinking. Indians have a different way of thinking. When I use the word thinking, it just remains, or it signifies the process of how do you make sense out of different words. So usually it starts off with some kind of a perception in mind, and all the actions in the mind today, in the brain, I wouldn't use the word mind, in the brain is through electrical signals. There is what is called as electrocardiogram. And today people are able to measure the signals and make a sense out of that. In fact, in some of the recent research that one of the senior scientists is doing in our laboratory is that you would have heard about these drones, which are now being very popular. And I am sure in another 10, 20 years, you will find drones would be delivering virtually everything in this world. And he is able to control a drone, not by any gesture or doing your movement, but just by concentrating and controlling his thoughts. And this is called as gesture. He will say, let the drone move up. I'm not talking about scientific fiction here, my friends. These are all reality today. And tomorrow, this is going to become a technology, especially with fighter aircraft when a pilot is going and he may not have time to press a button, but a thought comes in his mind that I should somehow make sure that a missile which is loaded should go and fall. That action can actually be achieved today. They call this as a cognitive drone. You think, let the drone go up. So now they are able to do lower level, like, drone going up, coming down, turning left, turning right. But the days are not far away when mind or the thought that you have in your entire system can actually create several things. So this thought is a very, very powerful thing that as youngsters, all of us, or even young and old, should realize. You should learn the habit of controlling the thought that actually comes in your mind. It is said that on an average per day, a person goes through something like 85,000 thoughts. Many of them are repetitive in nature. You won't even believe that they are repetitive. And sometimes a thought can take a century or it can take years for it to really crystallize. I will give you an example. Maybe you would have heard this story. The backdrop in my screen, what you see is Indian Institute of Science. Today, we are actually close to about 111 years, 110 years. We started in 1909. But the story how this institution formed is responsible for a very, very powerful thought. And this thought essentially happened between two individuals who were traveling on that famous ship journey of Swami Vivekananda in the later part of the 19th century. And I'll cut this long story very short by saying Swami Vivekananda seems to have asked J.N. Tata at that time, what is the purpose and what is the purpose of your journey in this ship? J.N. Tata seems to have remarked, I am going to United States as well as Germany. This conversation seems to have taken place somewhere outside Tokyo in near the Pacific Ocean when they were moving around. And he seems to have said that I am going to a Western world to bring steel making technology. Remember, steel making technology. And at Jamshedpur, there is a big iron plant. Even today, it is working. Swami Vivekananda seems to have said, Western world may give you steel making technology, but who will teach material science? Please watch the sentence. They may give you technology, but who will give you material science? Why don't you think of opening a higher institute of learning of both our ancient aesthetics and modern science in India? We are talking about a period where India was still under the colonial rule. That thought was so powerful. It was so powerful, and the impact it had on J.N. Tata was so profound that after coming back, J.N. Tata writes a very beautiful letter. It is there in our archive. Some of you are interested, please go and read them. Such a beautiful Anglican English where he said, Swamiji, you will remember me as a fellow traveler, and you also know about my own purpose of trying to build an institution. But that one interaction and a powerful thought ensured that J.N. Tata also, that entire action that he had to build an institution got fortified. But unfortunately, both of them, they were not alive when IASC came into a being. Both of them, they were passed away in the early beginning of the 20th century. But then this idea was so powerful that Sister Nivedita picked up on this idea. Padamsha, who was the secretary of J.N. Tata, both of them worked together. The Mysore Wadayars, who were their devotees of Swami Vivekananda, they gave away the entire land, and this institution came into being in 1909. And J.N. Tata, when he died, he divided the property that he had in those days into two parts. Even today, we get rent from certain properties which are there in Nariman Point. Friends, thought is so powerful. Even after 100 years, today you have an institution in my backdrop, which is the beacon of knowledge and learning in this part of the world. Indian Institute of Science is full of people who are all completely passionate about trying to understand both, of course, external nature. You would understand external nature only when there is a nice calm in your internal nature. Your ability to ask questions and trying to find answers to those questions is what dictates a human being. You have to ask this question, who am I? What is the purpose of my life? Why have I come into this world? What is it that I have to do? Is my end goal trying to get a job, trying to do a degree? Is that my goal, or is it something different? Can I go back and try to learn something to the rest of the world? Can I try to figure out? So I think I wouldn't go too far off because the time is very short. But just one last point that always you will have is there will be a fight in your mind between whenever you want to do a good thing, there will be a usual, like for example, if there is a winter night and you want to light a fire, when you try to light a fire with a firewood, immediately a wind would blow and it would go off. And you would have problems in lighting a fire. So there is always a fight that happens in your mind when you want to accomplish a thing. But don't bother about failures that you will have. Perseverance and trying to accomplish your ultimate goal is what is more important. And your ultimate goal is to do good things to the society. And many of us who are assembled here, we may remember the names of our grandmother at the maximum, grandmother's grandmother. But we all remember the name of Vivekananda. Was he related to you or me? Why do we do that? Because he worked for the nature, he worked for the world. People who work for the world, who work for society, this society will remember them even after 1,000 years. But if you are going to work only for yourself, your selfish needs, alas, this world has got no place. We remember Adi Shankara, who was actually with hundreds of years. The list can actually go on. So the key thing at the end of the day is, please remember that your external nature understanding scientifically, or science essentially involves understanding external nature. Understanding internal nature is spirituality. If you can understand this subtle connection between spirituality and science, life will be a wonderful place. Please ensure that you understand your culture and nature so that your future is secure. Thank you very much, Swami. So I will stop here and maybe I would interact with questions because it's already 5:30, I suppose.
Oh, that has been brilliant and very crisp as usual, as is your flair and the training that you got. In short, can you just say, in the present circumstances, with the pressure of education or the syllabus, which is not very sweet for the young students, +1, +2 students mostly are listening to you. How do you think we can motivate them or keep up that spirit of inquiry, spirit of service, and spirit of spiritual values in science? How do you think it can be done?
That's a very pertinent question from JC. Please don't get overawed by these entrance examination, this syllabus, and several things. If you have a right mindset to explore this wonderful journey of information, knowledge, and wisdom, see, these are three different things. Don't confuse information to knowledge and knowledge to wisdom. The simplest example that I usually give is a tomato. We know is a fruit, right? All of you know that tomato actually is a fruit. And your information again tells you that fruit salad means you use different fruits. But have you eaten any fruit salad where they use tomato? Why? So information, tomato is a fruit, is information. But tomato should not be used in fruit salad is knowledge. But when you actually implement, it becomes wisdom. So your entire journey should be such that we enjoy every bit of that. Don't try to mug up anything. Don't ever take anything for granted in life. And don't take even whatever I am speaking to you with as if it is a gospel or Bible. There is nothing called like that. You have to question. Learn to question everything and stop memorizing. So you will have pressure, but don't bother today. Just one entrance examination. See, all the entrance examination, unfortunately, are multiple choice. And if you go to a coaching center, it will teach you how to eliminate the wrong answers rather than finding the right answers. You will have to learn the habit of finding the right answer. So if you don't qualify, don't get into IIT, that is not the end of the world. But that habit of reading from good textbooks, trying to relate it with nature. When you learn a simple principle, how do you relate it to day-to-day life? That is very, very essential. There can be no greater chemistry than the kitchen. There can be no greater biology than the bathroom. There can be no greater physics than the playground. Learn to play, learn to sleep, learn to eat, and learn to enjoy this journey, and don't do because somebody is asking you to do. So at this stage, we all feel very stressed because we are more worried about the end goal. And the end goal will take care of itself if you learn to get into a proper routine every day. In fact, people don't become great because they do extraordinary things. No, they do ordinary things in an extraordinary manner with amazing consistency. Every day's work is what actually gives you the final destination. So all of you should cultivate a habit of getting up on time, sleeping on time. Maybe the golden 1/3 rule of Sarang Vishweshwaraya is very apt here. 1/3, he divided the 24 hours into three parts. He used to say 8 hours sleep, 8 hours personal work, 8 hours professional work. So this is just like watching a movie. All of you watch a movie with so much of enthusiasm. And unfortunately, the hero or heroine will tell the dialogue only once. But then after 1.5 hours, when you come out, you repeat the dialogue, no? You know what color dress that heroine wore, or the hero, what did he say? Why you don't have the same kind of concentration or enjoyment or relaxation of your mind when you open a physics textbook? It's all in our mind. So the power of concentration and trying to do different things is very critical. What we normally suffer at this age is when you sit in a movie, you are worried about the exam tomorrow. When you go into the exam, you are worried about the marks. When you go out to a hotel, you are worried about meeting your girlfriend or boyfriend. The mind actually wanders. So this is what I call as understanding your inner nature. How to keep your mind focused and sharp on a job is very essential, and plus enjoyment. See, when you go and play cricket, for example, everybody becomes Sachin Tendulkar. You may get out at zero, but you don't feel very bad about it. You just go and play. So treat at this particular age, I would say, just enjoy, be more organized, and the result will take care of itself if you start doing small things in day-to-day life with proper consistency. I would also urge you to write your own diaries. Please make a habit of cultivate a habit of noting down good ideas that come to your mind, bad ideas. What are the 5 things that you did today? What are the things you would like to do tomorrow? So writing a diary actually helps you to get organized in the manner of your thought process. Sorry, Swamiji, maybe it was a slightly longer answer.
Okay, no problem. Anybody likes to say something or ask a question can raise your hand. I'll unmute. Somebody from Chennai or Hyderabad or Bangalore. Yeah, Maitri is there. Maitri, you can unmute. Introduce yourself.
Namaste Swamiji and everybody. So this is Maitri here. I'm from Chennai. So I would definitely tell sir that actually I'm really inspired by you, sir. The way you gave the examples, it really related us with the real life work, daily activities and all. I am really inspired, and actually I'm a biomath student. And you told how to control stress, because nowadays I'm feeling a bit stressed of studies and about the competitive exams and all, but the way you explained us how to handle stress, I will definitely try to implement in my life. And thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful speech. And I would like to thank to the Vivekananda Institution for keeping this session. Actually, it really inspired everyone. I hope. Thank you. This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Maitri. We'll go to Prakash from Hyderabad. Unmute, please.
Namaskaram, Swamiji. Namaskaram, sir. Namaskaram, everybody. I just watched your TEDx talk, sir, about the shock waves being used to clear the biofilm layer in the body and how it could be a very revolutionary technique. That was really eye-opening. I mean, how could anyone think of using shock waves to clear a layer in the deep inside the body? So, and again, I visited the Indian Institute of Sciences website and read about you and read about how you're working in the hypersonic field. My question is, I really like the hypersonic, when I hear that, when I look at the images of the even it be the artistic renders of the actual missile. Can I ask you, how far is India in making an actual hypersonic missile? I mean, that could be a secret, but just a curious question I had.
Yeah, thank you. India is doing very well in this direction. So all that I can say is it is not too far away in the near future. You will hear about these kind of things. Certainly, India is doing very well in this count. So we don't have to be worried about what is the current state of research in this area. And at the end of the day, these kind of ideas, they all come from 3 different things. So we have to distinguish between intuition, instinct. So we need to know. So once you have a calm mind and then you focus on it for a long time, many of these things actually emerge. And hypersonics is a very exciting area. Shockwave is also an exciting area where people are looking at some very interesting solutions. Finally, all of this boils down to one part, which I'm sure in Ramakrishna Ashram you would have heard as Atmano Mokshartham Jagat Sitaya. So if you really want salvation, you should look at welfare of the world. So learn to keep society as the frontal end. This is what I really mentioned as value-based science in the beginning of my talk. I think life would be a wonderful place. You will have enough fulfillment of all your findings and work in life. All the very best.
Thank you, Jagdish. Harini from Chennai.
Namaste to Swamiji and respected sir. Sir, all I want to know is, I'm not basically into science stream, but I'm really fascinated in the stream of mathematics. But when I heard about many mathematicians, to quote Mr. Fermat, who was basically not any background of maths, he was a lawyer, but even during his night time, he used to work on it, and he found very great theorems in his field. Is it really possible for any student like that, not having a academic background in that science or any research for that matter, can we ever succeed in finding something that makes some difference in the field? Is it possible, sir?
See, the mathematics is the foundation of science. So maths and science are all interlinked. So it's not something totally different. Recently, there was one very interesting experiment the neurosurgeon in UK did, was trying to figure out, see, most of the monks, when they do meditation, they do believe that they get that deja vu kind of a feeling, which is the ultimate ananda, or the Sachidananda as it is called in scriptures. So he wanted to figure out whether mathematicians of all the people, if you put about 10 of them in a common room, they were all shown different equations like Euler equation, Navier-Stokes equation. Navier-Stokes equation is the one which defines the fluid mechanics, conservation of mass, momentum, and energy. And then their MRI brain was actually mapped. And they were really trying to figure out which portion of the mind or the brain really starts activating whenever they get that ecstatic feeling. And surprisingly, in this experiment, he concludes that the Euler equation seems to trigger, and the mathematicians get the same kind of excitement when they see that. So they were all blindfolded, and it's a very interesting experiment. So it's even Srinivas Ramanujan and even Mary Curie also had this in her autobiography. She actually records that certain reactions which she could not balance, in the night she was able to walk and write it up. But please remember, these things will not simply happen if you sit under a tree. You will have to meditate and work in that direction in a very deep manner. And just because you don't have a degree, it doesn't matter. And the degree is only given by some university because you clear some examination. But people who actually read and they do some kind of a penance in this area, they will always be able to go around. We had some illustrious scientists in India. In fact, you wouldn't have heard about the name Professor Rangarajan, who was an acclaimed electrochemist in IISc. He was a BA mathematics person. He was not even a PhD. He was a theoretical electrochemist, and he was a full professor in IISc. So such kind of examples are there in plenty. Your degree and what you achieve in life have no connection. And certainly the mathematician abstract theorems which have come out, even including Srinivas Ramanujan's life, such things have been possible. But then for that, you have to be constantly concentrating. That is why Swamiji very nicely says that if there is certain task, please sit on it, let your blood and every part of your organ, let it feel that particular task. Nature will conspire to make it happen, he says. So nature also will be towards your success. So it's a good idea. Enjoy mathematics. Mathematics is the foundation on which all modern science and technology can build. Anything that you cannot quantify is not science. If I cannot express science in the form of mathematics, it is no science. All the best.
Thank you very much, sir.
Do you have time for one question, Professor?
Sure. No issue. Please go on.
Yeah, Sri Vidya from Chennai, please. From Hyderabad. Sri Vidya from Hyderabad.
Namaste Swamiji, Namaste sir, and Namaste everybody. This is Sri Vidya from Hyderabad. I'm doing my 12th, sir, and I wouldn't lie saying that I understood all the science experiments that you told, because I am from math stream and I was never really connected to physics as a student. And my question to you is regarding spirituality, because now I have observed many people connecting spirituality to the puja, only the puja they do, or the puja that happens in their house, all the stotras and everything. But not all students, not all young people are interested in that. What I would like to ask or know is that how we can imbibe spirituality in our life using small steps, not doing everything which takes a lot of time.
See, doing puja at home is not spirituality. Or going to a temple is not spirituality. spirituality is to live life in its fullest stream, understanding what is your final goal in this world. What is the simple way that you could do? You could actually become, you are a student today. And what is the job of a student? To acquire knowledge, to acquire more information, become more wise. And so that you become a worthy citizen. So how do you move in that direction? And if you can look at building a lifestyle which is going to go in that direction to the best of your ability, that is spirituality. Maybe you should get up on time. You should take care of your body. You should actually exercise. You should sweat every day. You should sleep well, eat well, but at the same time, become responsible for your life. Your life is so beautiful, and not many people have the luxury of having, good strong legs and good strong hands and a healthy mind. A healthy person, if he does not acquire more knowledge and contribute to life or the world at large, it's an intellectual crime, says Swami Vivekananda. So if you don't really work hard and enjoy the entire process and become a worthy citizen, then you are not really doing justice to the wonderful gift your father and mother, the biological father as well as the God has done. And how do you really do that? By ensuring that you do your duty in the most harmonious manner. That is duty, that is karma yoga, that is spirituality. Just because you don't go to temple, it doesn't mean anything. Scriptures are not just in books. Doing good to others, being sincere about it, being honest about whatever you do, trying to keep self away from many of your actions. In fact, psychologists say at least 3 to 4 actions in your day should not really be benefiting you. Then automatically you will be a very happy person. How do you help others? How do you imbibe some of these things? How do you take care of elders in your family? How do you, be good? You can talk good things. You don't have to be abusive. How do you listen only to good things and make good friends? It's very essential at your age. Tell me who your friends are, I will tell you who you are, tells a British poet. So we have to be very careful about it. So spirituality, don't be under the impression that it is doing some ritual and then come and do some nonsense. If you are not having a clarity of thought and sincerity of purpose, then you are no longer spiritual. Anybody who is spiritual should ask this question: who am I? What is the purpose of my life? Not once, 100 times you have to keep asking that question. Answer to that question should actually guide your action. So every day, make sure spiritual life, all that it means is good. Your words actually become thoughts actually become words. Your words become your action. Action becomes your habit. Habits become your character. Your character will decide your destiny. That is spirituality. So have good thoughts, good actions, and good habits. Very essential. Day-to-day life, you should have nice habits. Habits will not come after 40 years. It has to start right from beginning. That is where association with Swamiji, living with saints. For example, if you take Bodhmayanandaji himself, what is his purpose of life? Maybe he's renunciated everything and joined the Ramakrishna order to really look at spiritual enlightenment. But why is he taking so much trouble in trying to talk to youngsters? Because he believes that is a very good way of transforming. He is not related to you, but he does this day in and day out, not from now, as I know, maybe for the last several decades. That is spirituality. He is not just asking you to do or recite some shlokas and do some puja alone. But then reciting shlokas are very important because it actually helps you to keep your mind focused. You can focus on several things. One of the challenges is how do you do different things with the same amount of intensity? When you recite a shloka, you must do that. When I am talking to you, my entire mind, body, and soul is only with you. But the moment I go out of this program, I don't think I will only be focusing on this. I'll focus on something else. So our entire purpose of education should be how you can collect information, do multiple things with the same amount of intensity. So everyday life, please learn to cultivate this in a habitual form. Then life will be comfortable.
Professor, brilliant. Last one question we'll take and conclude. And I think you should give some more time, maybe next week or some other time when you're convenient, to have a detailed question answer session with these youngsters. So we go to Chennai again. Maya Madhu Iyer has raised her hand.
Namaste, Maharaj. Namaste, sir. So actually, whenever in a meeting, before I join, I just look about the resource person, and usually, even if they are not much well known or anything, their name comes on the top, like the most searched person in Google. But today, when I was seeing about Jagdish sir, I checked, and everybody other than Jagdish sir had come on top, like the cricketer from CSK, the actors and actresses. But when I just checked, only if the Aerospace Institute's website and LinkedIn had his profile, and I was really amazed. And I thought maybe he was not well known or anything. But when I came here, he's so good and he talks so well. He gave us a lot of information, and I'm really surprised why Google is this way. And also, sir, I also write a diary, but I don't maintain it as a diary. I actually maintain it in a bullet journal form. And here's my spread for July, because that's the only legible spread I have. So I have this calendar where I just put in everything, and then I have a mood log and a gratitude diary, sir.
Very
And
good.
Great, great.
for me, I feel that is better than a normal diary, because we don't have to write personal experiences or anything, but just what inspired us the most the day. Thank you, sir.
But I would also urge you to write. The reason is the following. See, normally when you write, you get time for contemplation. It is very essential in the learning process to absorb what you have just heard and sit on it for some time. And writing basically gives you that extra luxury rather than just typing it on a computer. That is why olden days people used to say that writing is so essential, not because as a means of storage or anything. That's fine. You can store it more comfortably. But when you write, usually you think. The connection between the thought and the speed with which you write, they don't synchronize very well. That happens only during exams, right? And sometimes in exam, the biggest challenge for a student is mind will be thinking very fast, but you are not able to translate. So I would still urge you to write by hand at least one page or half a page every day during your student days, mainly to think. You will just write something and then you may score it out, and that actually helps you. But it's good that I am very glad that you're keeping some kind of a diary. And believe me, after 20 years, when you read them, you will really feel very happy about it. And it is
That's
important
the
for us
exact
to know.
reason why I have it, sir.
Do it, please do it. Maybe some poem you would like or some caption that you see somewhere. And it's always important to do that.
In fact,
Sure, sir.
just to add what she said, Google should do a little more meditation also and find out where
True,
Jagdish
Maharaj.
is there.
It's so true.
See, it is not necessary. See, all these social media, everything is excellent. We have to respect technology.
Yeah,
But then good science and good living doesn't need recognition.
absolutely.
Please remember that the only recognition that a scientist gets, see, I have had deja vu moments in my own life where certain experiments for almost 6 months, they never resulted properly and the whole experiment collapsed after 6 months. And mind you that even I have cried. I have no shame in telling you this. It's not that I have succeeded in all my experiments. No. And there are days in the where ours is a wonderful campus. I have gone alone and I felt frustrated. I felt very sad because my 6 to 8 months of hard work on a particular experiment never gave me result. Everything collapsed. But then if you have an habit and self-confidence, next day morning I went up and then probably did the experiment in a different way. And then when I got the result, that sheer joy at that particular instant in knowing answers to your unknown question, that is the greatest treasure that a scientist can cherish throughout his life. And one of the biggest things about scientists is throughout your life, you can be a student. No other profession gives you this luxury. I am actually being paid to keep being a student throughout my life. I may have one question when I begin my research, and believe me today that after 25 years in this field, I feel like a fool because there are so many things that I do not know. And what I started off and what I am today, even my own PhD thesis, I will throw it in garbage today because the things have evolved like this. So be a scientist. It's a good profession because this is the only profession where you can go and meet multitude people around the world, exchange your ideas, come across some of the most brilliant minds that you have ever seen in the world. There are brilliant minds in IASU whom you would never have heard the name. I know of more than 20 people, all their life, all they did was They just did research. They wrote the property in the name of IASC and they very quietly went away. Nobody would have even heard the words of Vasudeva Murthy. But if you go to Taiwan, in the National Archives there, they have kept small minutes of the meeting where there were two individuals from Indian Institute of Science. One was Vasudeva Murthy, another was Professor Suryan. They were the one who actually recommended the Taiwanese government in the 1970 to start manufacturing silicon wafers.
Oh,
Vasudeva Murthy made a single crystal silicon in the lab, a big one, in the 1980s. Professor Suryan, he established a foundry near Salem to produce silicon wafer. Unfortunately, even today, all the silicon wafer, the bulk of that India gets is imported. Whereas Taiwan, who took their advice, captured more than 35% of the market in the entire world. If there is an earthquake in China, Taiwan, you will not get your mobile phone, you will not get any electronic goods because the fundamental integrated chip is actually made out of silicon. And that silicon foundry, that idea emerged here. Had you heard about Vasudeva Murthy? You wouldn't hear,
Yes,
but
sir.
it is not necessary. Just because we don't come in Google, it doesn't mean anything. I'm not trying to belittle that. Please don't misunderstand me. What I am trying to say is life is so wonderful when you go through this journey of trying to know the unknown. External unknown is science, internal unknown is spirituality. That's all.
brilliant, brilliant. We'll just we'll travel to New Delhi quickly. Aura Kukreja, young student from New Delhi.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, sir, for everything you said. It was really influential for me. I was genuinely really inspired. So my question for you will be, even though when you try to be responsible as a student, like under all the pressures that come with being a teenager in today's century, sometimes certain thoughts of anxiety that are uncontrollable, or like certain thoughts that come to your head and you have no control over them. So because of that, you start to lose motivation over like other basic stuff over your life, like, like following your routine, or keeping up with your academics, or anything like that. So then you try, it's like, you shouldn't be slaves to your minds, but it's a different thing to know something and to realize it. So you try to meditate, but then again, there's just so many thoughts in your head that you're finding it very harder to do. So how to deal with that?
So it's a very, very important question that you asked, actually. See, it's all good to say, but then you will have times in your life where several things you cannot control. Correct? It could be a small accident, or it could be you have done very well and it has not given you results. So it's all wonderful to say, oh, you should control your mind. But in such situations, it's very difficult to control. It has happened in my own case. See, we have had some major accidents, and then suddenly the part of the laboratory collapses, the whole world comes behind you, everybody is shouting. So what do you do? When you are in a situation where you cannot control anything, what you can actually control is the way you react to those situations. That is entirely up to you. And how do you react to those situations, or whether you respond to those situations? Most of us actually react to those situations immediately. But after some time, you believe that I should actually respond. And what is the difference between this reaction and response? It's a very subtle difference. Suppose, say, I have an accident. What is the immediate reaction? You go and shout at that fellow. In fact, many years ago in Ranchi, I remember that I was a pillion rider and my classmate was riding. And in one of the busy streets, it was this guy's mistake. He actually went and hit the other guy. I'm shouting, hey, watch out, don't do. But nothing really happened. That person fell down. But this guy left the scooter with me, went and bashed him up. I was very annoyed. I said, it was your mistake. Why did you do? He said, if I had not done that, the entire crowd would have hit both of us. It was a pure jungle Raj, where might was the right. So going and hitting him was actually reaction. But I asked, don't do that. Please check whether that boy or that person is he hurt. Should we shift him to the hospital? Your response. So in such situation, what I suggest is, it is very natural for you to feel uncomfortable, throw the books and go away. Please do it. Don't bother. It's a very natural reaction. If you feel like crying, please cry. I have told you this here and I have told this in several forums. Crying is a very natural emotion. Nothing wrong with it. In fact, when you cry, what is hidden, imbibed in you or what is bottled up actually comes out. And then after some time, you will have, this is where we should not forget about our larger purpose and utility of human mind. And we are so powerful, the next day or 3-4 days after that, you can always get back to your routine without any problem. Because that would be your response rather than a reaction. So you should learn to observe and look, hear and listen. See, these are all subtle things. So in those cases, you live the life for yourself. Don't bother about reactions from others. This is where I said that as youngsters, please take care of your life. It's so precious. Don't live the life because your father said something, mother said something, teacher said something. Unless otherwise you take charge of your life, we are bound to have problems whenever there is a situation which is not beyond our control. And certainly there will be several situations, not one. But how you respond to those situations is entirely with you. And that is where these kind of discussions or thought process in the early part of your life will actually manifest itself as what actions you will take. You can actually keep a filter. This is what I normally do. This is where I said, I have a filter. I mean, this may look very stupid, but then this is something which has worked for me. I have had the privilege of living with the monks of the Ramakrishna order, not for 1 year, but for 5 years. And I have lived with them, I have played with them. They were the wardens of the residential school. I have observed them from close angles. They were the one who actually always tell me what the values are. Probably in your case, you have been associated with the activities of the ashram in Hyderabad. Swami Bodhmayanandaji would be that role model. Whenever you get into a problem, please ask a question. If I do this as a reaction to that situation, will Swamiji approve of this action? Will he be happy or will he be angry with me? It's a very, very simple thing. It is a final test that I do. In my case, I always think about Swami Sureshanandaji Maharaj. He is no longer alive today, but he was the one who gave me admission, took care of all my food, clothing, everything. And of course, I have had several Swamijis and the name is endless. If you ask me, I would talk the whole day with that. But that is a litmus test. If you have a role model, if you have your mother, for example, many a time mother would be a very nice role model. Please just ask a question. Will my action make her happy or will she be sad? Will she be sad? I think that litmus test is good enough for you to get back to your routine. But it is perfectly fine to fail. Everybody has failed. There is no one individual around the world who has succeeded every time that he has worked. No. If somebody says that, then something is wrong. And failure is the fertilizer for success. And in fact, you should learn to fail and learn to learn from failure. If you don't fail, in fact, today, the most modern, somebody mentioned Google, right? There is a psychological test actually. They actually ask people, what are the places or what are the projects where you have failed and how did you overcome that? And an ability of an individual to encounter failures and then come back on track is considered as the highest virtue of a leader. It's very important. They call it as a failure management. If you don't know how to manage your failure, you are not a leader. You're not a good human being. So remember, the way you respond to a situation can be the game changer. See, in fact, Mary Curie's life, you should read, is her autobiography. I suggest everybody read Mary Curie because one of the amazing things about that particular wonderful lady is in the house, they said that she has to get married. And she was not interested in settling down to such kind of a thing. The science, the urge in her inner urge was so powerful that she wanted to do something for the humanity. Of course, what she did is history. But what is very interesting is, even today, if you go to France, you are not allowed to step into her grave beyond 20 seconds because the radioactive activity in that portion is so high that you need special permission to even visit her grave. But that remarkable lady, she wrote and took all the patents in the name of humanity. She did not patent the idea in her own individual name. Even today, Marie Curie Foundation gets millions of dollars out of the work that she did, and it is all being used to support postdoctoral fellows, doctoral fellows across the world. What a powerful lady, right? She took all her patents in the name of humanity. And she had so many problems, and she did not get one Nobel Prize, but she got 2 Nobel Prizes. Correct? And each one of you who are sitting here, you are no less than any of them. You are all like wonderful flowers in the garden. Please don't compare yourself with anyone else in life. That is the greatest crime that one can do. The each soul is potentially divine is probably one of the most powerful statements you would ever hear. You are all special. It is just that how do we manifest that specialness or divinity into something concrete? The moment that realization comes in you, I am sure you would do wonders. And I am sure maybe some Nobel laureate or maybe some big national leader is sitting among you. What you would become tomorrow, nobody knows. When we were in Vidyashala, I never thought that I would become scientist one day. It was absolutely not planned. Absolutely not planned. It's all part of life. If you can enjoy your day-to-day journey, nothing like it. And I'm sure remain positive throughout your life. And that is why I usually quote, this is also there at the YouTube. Make sure that your tongue should always be like a sugar factory. You should say sweet things. Don't try to be harsh on people. It is not worth it. Life is very short. And at the same time, your heart should be more like a love factory. Have universal love. Vasudeva Kutumbakam, etc. Right? Because tomorrow in your IT industry, you may have to interact with Koreans, Chinese, Japanese, Americans, Russians. Everybody is same because the blood color is same throughout the entire universe. So your heart should become like a love factory. And your head should always be like an ice factory. Don't become angry. So your tongue should be like a sugar factory. Heart should be like a love factory. Your brain or head should be like an ice factory. Your life will be satisfactory. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It's very relatable too, like especially about the thing of learning to fail. Like I do skateboarding, like really enjoy it. And one of the first things that I learned it from YouTube, is to fall from the skateboard first before you actually learn how to ride it. So yeah, it's just so relatable to real life as well. And thank you so much. This made me really happy.
Professor, we thank you very much. Many hands are slowly rising, but I think we'll have another session, a detailed session where they can open up and clear their doubts about studies, about life. And then we can make a beautiful bouquet of them. As you said, they are the flowers in the garden of life. They need to be just groomed a little, give a little bit immunity, nourishment, and expose them to higher values. I think we can make a great difference as Swamiji wanted, and the great scientists of our country also. Bangalore, Karnataka has produced C.V. Raman, Vishweshwaraya, and so many unknown scientists, musicians, artists, and people from all over the country, youngsters. Because of this festival, a couple of them could not attend. We will upload this recording in our YouTube channel for the benefit of other students. And we are now in the process of conducting a all India level leadership contest. All these students are participating there. We groom them, we question them, we give them projects, give them some ideas on how they can become leaders and why they want to become leaders. So that's going on last 2-3 months. That will go on for another 2 months. So these are all students from all over the country joining that, and one day we'll involve your topics for them to do some project or come up with some new thoughts, new ideas, and request you to support that project also.
The fact that they have all come in association with you, Swamiji, I have no doubt they will blossom into worthy citizens of the entire world. So it's so nice that they have found time to interact with you. Nothing can be more blissful.
And mission will become a reality. Thank you. Namaste. May Mother Durga bless you. And Navratri greetings to you. And in the near future, we'll have some interaction also.
Sure.
Thank you, Jagdish.
Thank you. Pleasure. Namaste. All the best.
We'll leave the meeting now, friends, and meet again sometime later.